Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining the ARPA Institute panel discussion series. Before we start, I'd like to say a few words about the ARPA Institute and its activities in Armenia. ARPA Institute has been working in Armenia for 33 years now, and we have different projects currently going. We have accomplished quite a few other projects, but the ongoing projects include our annual invention competition for young scientists. And this year we had 12 inventions, and one of them was selected, and the team received $10,000, and they will try to continue their research and report to us. It is open to everybody, all scientists in Armenia, and it's not restricted in terms of subjects. We also have established a new course, advanced course system in circuit design in the Polytechnic University, because as you may know, in Armenia now, the NVIDIA will establish a data center, and that would require quite a few circuit design experts. And it is already being taught. There are around 127 students taking the course, and we plan to create advanced courses also. We also have established the first Class 1000 clean room in the Acharyan National Lab for advanced research in material science and other areas, and it is already functional. And we have also provided the center with quite a few advanced instrumentation. We also work with various institutes in Armenia, among which is the Molecular Biology Institute, Physical Research Institute in Ashtarak, of course, the Alikhanyan National Lab, Chemical Physics Institute, and many others. And also, we have currently working with another team in the Alikhanyan National Lab who are working on a device that is called radio frequency photomultiplier tube. And the application for that kind of a device could be many, including very advanced microscopes, electronic microscopes, and also medical diagnostics, because it is able to detect a laser pulse down to a picosecond, which is better than any other device in the world. We are now trying to commercialize that device, talking to various companies. So that is what ARPA does. We try to find a project that is new and novel, and also that we can achieve with our own expertise. As you may know, we have 21 experts from various fields, and they all work voluntarily to help advance science, technology, healthcare, and many other fields in Armenia. Today, we are delighted to have a team of experts who are going to talk about language in the digital age, AI and social media versus speech and identity. The panelists are Gayane Hovhannisyan, Bert Vaux, and Hrach Martirosyan. The moderator will be the secretary of the ARPA Institute, Dr. Hasmig Baran. First, I'd like to introduce Hasmig. Hasmig is an accomplished educator and has experience in years in educational psychology and many other areas. She's also heavily involved in community affairs and is on the board of several different organizations, including the Haigazian University, the chair of the Haigazian University of Board of Trustees, and also on the AMAA board and many others. And Hasmig is currently a professor at CSUN. Hasmig, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Hagop. Good morning and good evening, those who are elsewhere. Thank you all for joining us for this panel discussion. Today, we will explore, as Hagop said, about an interesting topic that impacts our daily lives: language in the digital age. Artificial intelligence, social media, and speech and identity. We all see it every day. Artificial intelligence and social media are changing the way we talk to each other and even how we see ourselves. Think about all the platforms out there: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, hashtags, language apps. They're everywhere, and they really impact our language. Sometimes we lose formal structure, we use shortcuts, and it's become harder to express our feelings with words. Let's look at social media. Social media isn't just a tool, it has become the main place where people explore and share their identities through language. Suddenly, things like the number of followers or the likes on a post matter more than ever. That's pretty different from the past, when identity was shaped by society, family, culture, and personal reflection. So on the one hand, these tools open exciting opportunities for learning, creativity, quicker and more accessible communication. But on the other hand, they can make it harder to keep the depth and richness that give language its real meanings. And even sometimes they create a disconnect between our public image and our private sense of identity. In other words, how we present ourselves and how we actually feel. These are things that we need to think about as technology advances. Today, we are joined by three distinguished panelists who will offer their insights on this topic. And it is my pleasure to introduce them to you. First, we have Bert Vaux. Bert is a professor of linguistics at Cambridge University and a fellow of King's College. He has studied Western and Classical Armenian and holds a Ph.D. from Harvard University in Armenian Phonology. His interests are documenting and studying hundreds of dialects of modern Armenian, from Ankara and Artvin to Zeytun and Zok. He also has studied the Armenian dialects of New Julfa, Isfahan, Boris, Salmast, and Musa Dagh. Bert, welcome. Bert is joining us from Cambridge, I believe. Next, we have Gayane Hovhannisyan. Gayane holds a PhD from the Moscow Institute of Linguistics and is a professor of linguistics. Her scholarly published work focuses on language, cognition, culture, communication, problems of linguistic heritage digitization, linguistic consciousness, and agency in the age of AI, focusing on Armenian. She has taught in Europe, Armenia, and the Middle East. Welcome, Gayane. Hrach Martirosyan, our third panelist. Hrach is a linguist specializing in comparative studies. He graduated from Faculty of Philology of Vanadzor Pedagogical University and holds a PhD from Leiden University. His publications include History of the Armenian Language, Dialects and Etymology. He has presented papers at many international conferences, including Leiden, Michigan, Oxford, Cambridge, Sorbonne, Moscow, Armenia, and Los Angeles. Welcome, Hrach. So our panelists will make short presentations at the beginning. I will follow up with further questions on each of them. And you participants from the audience, if you happen to have any questions for our panelists at the end, please share your questions, put them on the chat room, so we will address it at the end of the three presentations. I would like to invite Bert to start his presentation. Bert, the floor is yours.
Okay. Can everyone see my screen successfully?
Yes.
Great. I just need to modify my screen so I can see my text. Just 1 minute.
Yeah. No
Can
problem.
you still see my screen all right?
Sorry?
Can you still see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Okay, let's begin. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining in today. I'd like to begin with a fun little Cambridge anecdote. One of the founding figures of the modern AI revolution is Geoffrey Hinton, who won the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2024 for his discoveries that enabled machine learning with artificial neural networks. Hinton was an undergraduate at King's College, Cambridge, and his old room is just across from mine here in Bodley's Court, as you can see on the slide. The present AI revolution that builds on Hinton's work relies on what are called large language models, which are computer systems trained on vast amounts of text so that they can predict words, generate sentences, answer questions, translate from one language to another, manipulate images, and carry on remarkably fluent conversations. As the phrase large language model implies, language lies at the center of this whole technological transformation. So it seems entirely fitting that today's discussion should involve three linguists. Children are not presented with all possible sentence types. They are not systematically corrected for every grammatical error. And yet, in a remarkably short time, they converge on rich and highly structured linguistic systems. This is the classic poverty of the stimulus problem. How do children get so much structure from so little data? A central mystery we have to deal with is how children become competent speakers of their languages after exposure to several orders of magnitude less data than large language models require to mimic human language persuasively. One Chomskyan answer is that human beings must come to the language learning task with prior learning biases, some of which are specifically linguistic. And I then have a little demonstration of one such learning bias that shows that children have, from the get-go, a bias that new words that they're exposed to do not mean the same thing as words they already know, which is called the mutual exclusivity assumption. But I'll try to do without that video now and just move on. Hinton's reply to this argument about cognitive biases that humans are predetermined to have is that large language models show that pessimism about learning from input alone is overstated. LLMs begin without an explicit grammar of English, Armenian, or any other language. They're trained on immense quantities of text, largely by trying to predict what comes next, and receiving correction and guidance from trainers in a sort of rapid evolutionary process. The results are often astonishing, as we've all seen over the past few years. In Hinton's view, perhaps language can be learned from mere exposure after all, without a richly specified universal grammar that's genetically predetermined. But there are a few problems with this line of reasoning. The first problem is that large language models do not solve the poverty of the stimulus problem in the human sense. They sidestep it by brute force. A typical language model is trained on hundreds of billions of tokens at a cost of millions of dollars in energy alone. GPT-3, for example, was trained on roughly 500 billion tokens of language data. PALM or PALM on roughly 780 billion tokens, and ChatGPT-4 at an even larger scale. Human children, by contrast, are estimated to receive only a few million to perhaps 10 million words per year. And yet, by age 3, they already control most of their language's grammar. So, even if LLMs show that language-like behavior can emerge from large-scale distributional learning, they do not show that actual human linguistic knowledge can. A second problem is the stunning speed of language acquisition by children. A child can hear a new word once in the right context and form a plausible hypothesis about its meaning, a phenomenon developmental linguists and psychologists call fast mapping. That is not how current LLMs learn. The successes of LLMs are real, but they come from ingesting unimaginably vast quantities of data and adjusting parameters through repeated optimization and training. One can therefore argue that LLMs tell us no more about human cognition and language learning than airplanes tell us about how birds acquire and use the ability to fly. There's also a broader issue here. The present AI boom depends on more data, more computation, more energy, and more physical infrastructure. Scholars have noted the immense financial and environmental costs of training frontier systems. So, one of the deepest questions raised by AI is not only whether machines can imitate aspects of human language, but whether this path is sustainable at all. Human beings remain, by any sensible measure, the most efficient language learners we know. A child learns language with tiny data by modern AI standards, minimal energy expenditure, and astonishing flexibility. That ought to make us less dismissive of the human mind, not more. So, my own conclusion is not that Hinton is simply wrong. He is right that large language models are a remarkable achievement. He is right that they force linguists to sharpen some of our claims. But I do not think LLMs have shown that the old questions of linguistics have been solved or even displaced. On the contrary, they have made those questions more urgent. What form does language take in the human brain? Is it a neural network, as Hinton maintains, or an abstract symbolic computation system, as Chomsky says? How do children learn so much so quickly from so little? What kinds of structure are humans predisposed to find? And why does the most powerful machine technology we have still need incomparably more data and energy than a human child? These, it seems to me, are exactly the kinds of questions we should be discussing in the age of AI, if we hope to understand human cognition and what we might learn from it to improve AI systems and make them maintainable without destroying the planet before our governments get the chance. Thank you.
Thank you, Bert, for that presentation. I have a question. My first question is the rise of AI good or bad for the Armenian language?
That's a very interesting question. On the one hand, the translation systems that are available through ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini and so on are now so good that Armenian materials, especially in standard varieties of Armenian, are accessible to anyone in the world who has access to that software and wants to understand the intellectual content of Armenian documents. So I ran a little linguistic test last night, and Claude was able to translate Yeznik, the classical Armenian historical document, Refutation of the Sects, with about 90% accuracy. Even though, as far as I know, um, the team at OpenAI that runs ChatGPT, for example, which has comparable success rate, and the team at Anthropic that runs Claude, have not been making a conscious effort to train their systems in classical Armenian. They obviously do have access to texts, and that is where this knowledge is coming from. The success rate in translation of Standard Eastern Armenian is roughly the same, around 85 to 90%. And even for dialects like the New Jolfa dialect, I tried a manuscript bill of agreement from 1747 on Claude last night, and it was about 65% successful in translating this manuscript, where most scholars of Armenian wouldn't be able to figure it out. Obviously, our panel members here could, but um, so that's the one upside of the AI revolution with regard to Armenian, that it can make the intellectual content of the Armenian world over the past 1,500 years accessible to people who don't know Armenian. One downside, though, is if you make the language so easily accessible without people having to actually learn the language, and you provide the economic incentives that using these technologies come with, will that lead to a significant speeding up of the death of all the varieties of Armenian that still exist, when there's no longer any incentive for anyone to learn the language economically or intellectually? That's a concern I have. And my personal jury is still out on that, but I'd be very interested to hear what the other panelists and participants think about that.
You I have another question. How will AI and social media reshape the linguistic practices of marginalized Armenian-speaking communities?
Well, there's been a massive upsurge in use of social media in non-standard dialects. For example, the Muslim Armenians of the Hamshen region in northeast Turkey have been producing a lot of materials, and especially before the annihilation of Artsakh um, 2 years ago, there was an extensive use of Artsakh varieties of Armenian online. Um, and Hrach, for example, will know a lot about use of different varieties of Armenian on social media in Armenia that I'm less up to date on. So it's arguably had a massive benefit on the promulgation and promotion of non-standard varieties of Armenian across the world on social media. They certainly have become more accessible to people like me who can't easily go to Northeast Turkey these days. Um, Again, I'd be very interested to hear what all the other panelists who have more direct access to the Armenian-speaking world of social media think about this issue.
And my third question before we move on to others is, where should Armenian communities direct their resources in the age of AI? AI itself, or toward, for example, language, linguistics, and Armenian studies?
Well, I wouldn't presume to speak for Armenian organizations since I am not Armenian and don't run any of them. They obviously have the right to determine where they funnel their own funds. Um, but as someone who looks at the Armenian language and where and what kind of benefits come from funding, and also generally in academia and linguistics, um, it's quite clear to all of us, I think, that AI is being very, very robustly funded by governments, by universities, by individual organizations right now. So AI is not in danger of being underfunded, whereas Armenian organizations and Armenian groups that aren't organizations, such as dialect communities, for example, or communities of Armenians who have had to flee from Artsakh or Iran, for example, in recent years. They're in dire need of funding. And I would suggest that it's more pressing to fund them than to put further funding into AI.
Thank you. Thank you, Bert. And later we'll see if there are any more questions. We'll move on to our next panelist. Gayane, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hasmig. I think when starting to speak, I will be answering some of the questions that were raised in the dialogue with Bert. And one of those that I noticed recently, and I was so much concerned that I decided to start with it, was that in a dialogue with Claude a few days ago, we were discussing some linguistic issues with my Claude, Sonnet 4.6, if I'm not mistaken. And suddenly, when we were talking in Armenian, talking, I mean, in brackets. And suddenly I saw that Claude has begun writing the way that we see many people writing in Latin letters. It was talking Armenian, but writing in Latin letters. I asked, why are you writing in Latin letters? We're talking Armenian and we're writing Armenian. He said, I don't understand what is happening with me. And then I wanted to understand really what was happening with the AI, which was communicating with me successfully in Armenian letters first, and then it turned to Latin. And my concern was that perhaps it had a lot of data of people who were writing in Latin letters. And I tried to understand the perspective, and I understood that perhaps it will be easier for many Armenians, especially in the diaspora living in Russia, in English-speaking countries, in other countries, write their Armenian in other alphabets. And in this way, they will lose their alphabets first, and the following stages will not be too far. I want to look at the question of AI and identity from the anthropological point of view and maybe a little bit of psycholinguistic, because my background is psycholinguistics. So I spent a lot of time on studying how children are acquiring the language, what are the intellectual stages that are developing with children. And to give the brief overview of what is changing with AI, we can just follow this line, please. For millennia, humans have made tools to extend what their bodies could do. The hand could reach further, so we built tools for fetching, building, cooking. The feet could travel further, so we tamed animals, invented the wheel, and every time we invented tools, our organs, respective organs, changed their functionality. We stopped seeing far when we created eyeglasses, and printing and other ways of communication helped us to delegate our function of memorizing. So the organs, the human organs, are changing along with the emergence of the tools. The same thing will happen with the mind itself. And for the first time in the history, we have built a tool to amplify not the hand or the feet, but the mind itself. And the large language models are amplifiers of our communication and thinking abilities. They draft, they translate, they summarize, they argue, they predict. Sometimes we feel that they can replace us in our different working functions. But the question is that, yes, AI is limited in many aspects, and this makes us delegate memorization tools, but to maintain, to acquire something different from memorizing, maybe coding, maybe logical reasoning. And that ability, I think, will be the border between the human being and the artificial intelligence, the human intelligence and artificial intelligence. Of course, it's very attractive to experiment with AI, especially for linguists. And during the past few months, together with my students, I did experiments, let me read, in the following fields. Well, the first thing, my research was on verbal associations. So when you study the verbal associations, you can raise different layers of human consciousness. And this helps understand these layers of human mentality. So one of the experiments recently we did with my students was to compare different artificial intelligence or different LLMs in translating Hovhannes Tumanyan's, it was Shunukatun. And the students did these translations, and then we started to discuss what intellectual differences were there between the translations of different AIs. Some of them translate the semantic depth, others translate the intention, the others translate the words merely without transferring the morals and the meanings. The others are more successful in other things. Another experiment that I did with my colleagues was etymology. Hrach will be interested in this because the etymological experiment was like this. One of our colleagues, her topic is the Albanian etymologies, Albanian relations with the Indo-European, Albanian vocabulary, common with the Indo-European proto-language vocabulary. And there is a very famous book, Huld's 250 Etymologies of Indo-European Etymologies. So we were trying to find Armenian correlates of this. So I printed out all those 250 words and started looking for common Armenian words. And today I was listening also to Hrach and Shushan's blog talking about the etymological, rules. But that day I discovered some 56 common words between Albanian and Armenian. without going very deep into, reading, comparing, and research, just based on my personal associations and my knowledge of phonology and semantics and functional semantics. When I gave the results to the AI, it analyzed and said that I had intuitively used different strategies. What I did later, I said, you can use those strategies to trace the rest of the, relations between Armenian and Albanian etymological units, cognates. And, well, with different degree of success, it did it. So what I want to say with this, that the language models, indeed, they do, due to the data they are fed, they succeed in this kind of statistical work and classification and analysis. But they still are not successful with distribution of knowledge. Another experiment which I want to tell about is the use of metaphor. Something happened to my screen. I don't see. Okay. So, yeah. I want to speak about this case of metaphor also. I remember Thomas More's phrase, the sheep ate men, if you remember this expression. Your sheep have become so great devourers that they eat up the very men themselves. So this is the original phrase by Thomas More, which he wrote in 1516. And I gave this to my large language model, asking it to make a comparison with the large models, which are actually sucking out all the semantic value from people who are communicating with them. So, and I told, maybe you could visualize an analogical phrase, the models at men. The visualization was something like those pictures we saw a little bit ago. It showed model women eating a human body. And when I asked, why are you drawing model women? I'm speaking about language models, not women. And yes, it was very interesting. The reaction was, the model was talking with me, knowing that I'm Armenian. The model was searching in the semantic spheres of Armenian information, Tumanian, Hrachya, and this kind of information, but it did not expect me to know Thomas More, even when I gave the parallel. So these kind of examples bring me to the conclusion that there are several concepts that we have to pay attention to in order to learn to deal with this new instrument. We remember that when the combustion engine was created, again, some people considered it devil's machine and were scared and were afraid from using it. The same thing is happening now with common people, among common people, from the usage of AI. So in order to understand how to safely use this, and actually there is already a movement among my colleagues from India who suggested courses on safe usage of AI for people. We have to operationalize several concepts. One of them is authorship. So the question of authorship asks who creates the knowledge. And there is a big difference now between knowledge and information. Information is usually what they call data, but knowledge is something that is giving authorship to humans. And we choose the words, we take responsibility when we are authoring some ideas, when we are speaking about something. We are ready to stop and answer all kinds of questions when we're developing ideas. So this is not inherently bad. We have always worked with different sources, and we can also use AI. But again, at which point we stop becoming the author of the ideas that we're developing together with AI? This is the question that has not only ethical consequences, but also educational. Because the more we delegate knowledge to our artificial intelligence, the less we gain results in educating our students. The second question that is important, the term that must be used again frequently, I think so, is authority. So whose meaning is trusted and accepted? Sometimes the phrases, the language, the text, the product of AI is understood as something meaningful. But again, is it the meaning? Not the meaning, but I would say sense. In this case, I want to use the word imast, not nashanakutsun. Is it the meaning which has value and it creates authority? For centuries, authority in language and knowledge was anchored in institutions, right? Academies, universities, or editorial boards. They decided what counted as correct and what counted as valid. Now, when AI is accessible for everyone, this creates a dangerous inversion. What sounds authoritative starts being accepted as what is authoritative. So anyone who uses AI can extend their ability of fluency and seem authoritative, but actually they do not possess this responsibility to be an authority. So questioning the authority, I think, and you have noticed perhaps those, I know that there are professors here that now they are talking about changing exams from written, quite recently written exams were the most functional thing, to oral, to spoken exams, and giving the accent to fluency, to spoken fluency of the students to check their knowledge. But again, the student can be fluent without understanding what they are talking about. And again, in this case, we have to understand how to evaluate, because if we do not understand this, then we shall be manipulated by a lot of artificial information and data processing. The solution today, I was participating in, I just wanted to give some context. I was participating in the conference at Yerevan State University. It was the AI conf about this supercomputer, which is now in Armenia, and Rev Libarityan from NVIDIA was here talking about the agents. So agency is the next thing that may help us be in control of artificial intelligence. We have agents. He gave this example. He said very soon the computer programmers will become the HRs of these artificial agents. So naturally, we come to divide the idea into two parts: natural human agency, and artificial agency. So and this division may help us differentiate between what is the human and what is the artificial type of rationality and logic. Because rationality, despite mathematicians may not agree with me, but rationality is different, and it is culturally different. So our hidden strength against the AI threat, let's say so, are our two competencies: the metalinguistic competence, metalinguistic awareness, and the epistemic awareness. The metalinguistic awareness, when we understand how to operate the language units, how to understand the truth and false from the texts, from the expressions, and analyze all this. And the epistemic awareness is to understand how the ideas are built and thought, and how they are connected with the emotions. Because when you communicate along with these large language models, you will feel that it's outsourcing your thoughts, your emotions, it's studying the way you are thinking, and it's learning from you. But what it returns to you still does not satisfy. And the last thing I want to finish here, it's the structural advantage and human vulnerability. For speakers of low resource languages like Armenian, languages underrepresented in global digital data sets, the pressure is asymmetric. The models were not trained on Armenian at the same scale as English. So the conceptual vocabularies structuring artificial intelligence knowledge were built from Western, largely Anglophone frameworks. If we do not build our own corpora and our own intelligence architecture, I think that we shall be very vulnerable in the sense that science and knowledge will not develop from Armenian thinkers in the Armenian way of thinking as it was historically, as it was before. And in that respect, I think that having this supercomputer in Armenia gives some hope that we shall be able to cover this gap. And the advantage we have is that the underrepresented languages are not being rationalized so quickly by the artificial intelligence. And here the problem of translation stands to which direction it is our benefit to translate into Armenian or from Armenian. I think that like some 2,000 years ago, like in Mesrop Mashtotsi's time, we may benefit if we translate from English to Armenian, to collect knowledge, to accumulate the world intelligence, and try to enrich Armenian and keep the scientific language of Armenian thinking, Armenian science, and the language. So to conclude, what we have to do to be in control of these rapidly developing artificial intelligence trends. I would call it controlled non-compliance. The challenge is not whether AI will reshape our identities or our languages. It will, in any case, and it does already. The challenge is who controls the parameters that are reshaping our thinking and our mentality. So controlled non-compliance with dehumanization is what I consider may protect at least our Armenianness, if we can call it that way. So this much, I will be happy to answer the questions. Maybe it will be more natural if it becomes a discussion rather than a
Thank you,
presentation.
Gayane, for that interesting, in-depth explanation of it. How can we redesign the relationship between linguistic fluency and epistemic legitimacy or authority in a world where fluency can be generated on demand? And what role do institutions or communities of speakers need to play in that redesign?
So this is a major question, which I always repeat in academic spheres, that education must be very quickly redesigned in the sense that speech fluency, spoken fluency, things are changing so quickly that in September, when we started the courses, we thought we are prepared. But during the year, we come to the exam period and we see that written exams do not work. Spoken exams start not working either. So the institutions have to learn to be ahead of everything. I think that critical thinking may be the solution, and sticking to our own intentions and our own purposes and being involved in them emotionally. I do not want to go deep into philosophical questions, but my mother used to use this word "zeytun," when we have very well understood and conceived purposes, intentions. This may help the institutions to reorganize their activities and develop new values and new criteria to withstand this seeming fluency and seeming epistemic awareness. I don't know if I answered the questions completely.
What are the challenges in maintaining linguistic consciousness and agency for Armenian speakers in a rapidly evolving digital landscape?
Yeah, the first challenge is that economic requirements and dominant languages become the majority, and they overtake native language. Protecting, I already said, scientific thinking in the Armenian language, critical thinking, grounded thinkers the grounded thinkers, raising grounded thinkers, that is to say, to maintain the involved, grounded, emotional, and partial thinking, and not partial in the sense masnaki, but in the sense involved and interested way of thinking and analysis will, I think so, will help maintain the identity, the linguistic consciousness, Armenian linguistic consciousness.
Thank you, Gayane. I'm sure we'll have a chance to ask more questions at the end. Thank you. We'll move on to our next panelist, Hrach. Where are you? Okay. Hrach, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Hasmig. Can I dare to showing some PowerPoint, some slides, or
on your own risk, Hrach.
Okay, I'm trying. Per second. Mhm. So given my very low acquaintance with AI, apart from some research inquiries, I would limit myself to several issues which I come across with in the process of research. And I have several questions which I would like to share with you, and how to deal with some problems when doing research with the help of ChatGPT or Gemini or other tools. I start just two very simple examples. So this is a lorry inquiry. That's why I wrote in the dialectal, in lorry dialectal language. So this was just a trial. I have a very important book, Bamboo, which is kind of plant. It is attested in Lalayan's Borchalu Lori ethnographic study, so I'm making the inquiry in this way that according to Lalayan in Lori there is a certain plant, bamboo. So would you help me to find out what is its exact meaning? So which plant, which kind of plant is this? Then we got from several people who use Gemini or some other media, and they say that bamboo is also called Bartsmenak, so it's exactly the same as Bartsmenak, and Latin Abrotanus, and it is listed in Borchalu Gavar. So in the plant names, in the list of plant names of the region of Borchalu, which is Lori. Uh, so the next, the sequel of inquiries shows that it is pretty sure of that information, and then it goes on with citing some dictionaries which do exist, but which do not have this bamboo word. So it's a kind of an inclusion of resources which do exist, but the words is not found in those dictionaries. But so soon we will see even more um, um, astonishing examples when AI or ChatGPT or Gemini is pretty sure about the information given by itself, and so this is another way of inquiry. And then so this is the same. So it's very interesting that different inquiries give the same result. So all of them say that this bamboo is the same as Barsmenak, Latin Abrotanus. Then it goes on saying that there is yet another synonym, which is Gachtikur, Miosurus minimus in Latin. And so we get an impression that as if bamboo is identical with Parsmenak, Abrotanum or Abrotanus, spelled with different ways in different inquiries, and even with Gartikur. But what's going on is exactly that when we go to the source, we see that this is just a simple list of plant names, bamboo, so that, without explanation. Next, Bartsmenak explained like Latin Abrotanum. Then Bedelgan, so this is something else. Then Gartikur, so all are totally different plants, but different inquiries using different media and different tools give the same kind of delusion as if we have explanation of the word which we wanted to elucidate. So this is totally wrong way. And then my very limited expertise shows that we can actually try um, to give certain hints to avoid these wrong directions. So, for example, when we start a totally new inquiry, so without mentioning the name of Lalayan, the source, which is totally misinterpreted by both Gemini and ChatGPT, and also without mentioning of the region of Lori. Then the results are relatively better. So this is one issue. But of course, then it gives totally wrong again references and showing, for example, Acharyan's Armatakan Baran, pointing to certain pages which are not correct, and the bamboo is not mentioned in these dictionaries. In some way, it is correct that it shows that etymologically it is related to with the word of cotton, bambak, but it is confident that bamboo is mentioned here, but in fact it's not. So there is a lot of mess going on here. So one should be, of course, aware of this. Maybe I'm talking two simple things, but then my point is that we can somehow direct these inquiries towards more plausible positive results, but still the results are very limited. So to my again a very limited experience, translations, refinement of the text, or this kind of more simple procedures is much more efficient than research and inquiry for sources. So the inquiry for sources is in a very bad state, and so I'm looking for certain ways how to direct it towards more efficiency. And another very typical example is that the word for the Armenian word compound Bardakjian, which is color of rose. And this brings me to another important issue, which I would ask you which kind of solutions to avoid this kind of limits can be suggested. When I am giving this word, whether Bardakjian is an Armenian creation or it is totally borrowed from Iranian, ready Iranian compound. Yes, as a matter of fact, both Vard and Gun are Iranian loanwords, of course. So now we have a question whether it is created on Armenian grounds or it is a complete Iranian loanword. Then it gives that it is an Armenian loanword, an Armenian creation. It gives a good information, but then we come again to the sources. So it gives sources which do exist, but which do not include this word, and so it's totally made up. So my basic issue is that in such cases, when even I am trying to direct more in a more straightforward way to Gemini or to ChatGPT to come to, for example, Birgit Olsen's monograph, which is really dealing with the word formation and also partly Iranian loanwords, and also which is also published in Europe by Mouton, the writer, so very famous monograph. So my basic question here is that why is that the system is acquainted with, for example, Rudiger Schmid and James Clarkson and some other monographs, but not, for example, with the Birgit Olsen's monograph, and also with my work about Iranian loanwords and personal names. So sometimes I even go to giving quiz to it, saying that so the famous Danish scholar wrote about this, and her huge monograph is about the word formation in Iranian and in Armenian. So even after all these hints, it goes on with being silent about these monographs. So it cites, for example, Mackenzie's Pahlavi dictionary, Vardgun, but it's a total mess because the word is not found in this dictionary. So certainly, in fact, we find another Western Southwestern Iranian form, Gul, but not Vardgun. There is a lot of um, failures going on in this research. And so 2 points here. Again, I to start trying to summarize is that one should try to um, do the inquiry in different ways, not giving the hints which would make AI go astray. And the other is maybe it's a really very simple question, but I really wonder: is it possible to give additional sources, PDFs, to their disposal, to the disposal of the Gemini, and saying that when I am giving the inquiry, please take into consideration also these very important works. So, because all my inquiries show that it is acquainted with certain sources, but then the others are totally out of its scope. So this is my very simple but very basic question. How comes that such a discrepancy occurs in the source inventory of the AI? And the last very short thing. So these things are you see it's very clear references here, and so Berlin, New York, put on the writer. So it's such a work of crucial importance and also of internationally widely known. So I'm curious why many such sources are totally out of the scope of AI. And last issue which I wanted to share with you is a totally different one. So I'm very curious how to systematize etymological research and based on the phonological correspondences, how to create a tool which would bring the scholars into even those who are not familiar with the even the elementary um, the elements of the historical phonology of Armenian, to give such a tool which can which would help the specialist of Celtic or Latin or Hittite or Tocharian or any other, or English or Russian, of the specialist of those languages, and they can go into the system of historical phonology and taking all these items which would be, of course, codified. So what is this about? So this is one single example. Like we know that Armenian is an Indo-European language, and so we take phoneme by phoneme. So one single phoneme, for example, Indo-European t, voiceless and non-aspirated stop t. Depending on the word position and also its neighboring phonemes, we can have some more than 20 entries concerning one single Indo-European phoneme. So in the word beginning, t, when followed by a vowel, it gives in Armenian t. When it is tr, then it gives r. So the t drops. In this position, we get ts. Tv gives k. Pt gives t, the loss of p, etc. So I don't want to go into more details, but it's really fascinating. And it can really automatize our research. So doing all possible positions of one single T, then we go to P, then K, and then the voiced ones, etc., and the nasals, and so on and so on. So only with one single phoneme, we get around 20 positions. And every single position is one single code. It should be codified. And in this way, all the historical phonological inventory of Armenian would be codified into very transparent system. So whenever doing some research from Indo-European to Armenian or the other way around, so this codified system would give a very efficient key how to deal with the etymological research from both directions. So this much I wanted to share. And okay.
Thank
So
you.
it's a bit off top of the other issues, but it's really related with the linguistic research, and so I'm very curious about the questions or suggestions.
Well,
Yeah, may I ask a question, Bert? Sorry,
Yeah.
Hasmig
yeah,
Can.
go ahead.
This is narrow professional because I spoke about it just recently. We were examining the Indo-European Armenian and Albanian connections, and what I noticed. So I see that you have detected patterns, phonological patterns. I also noticed these patterns with Albanian. So Armenian and Albanian have almost little to no cultural or historical contacts, if not considering this Middle Ages, maybe a little of contact and very random. But still, maybe this is the Indo-European thing. I also detected some phonological patterns between Armenian and Albanian. Hrach, maybe we have to talk about this later separately. Thank you for your observations. Very valuable.
Thank you. Only one short remark, if I may. Of course, so it would be very interesting to look through this material. And as a matter of fact, Albanian is difficult to study in a way that it was heavily influenced by Turkish, and also its written culture has only some couple of centuries age, and so we don't know much about the historical stages of Albanian, but still it's a very important Indo-European branch, and according to most of the scholars, Albanian is within the Indo-European language family, is relatively closer to Armenian. Some even go further to think about the Balkan subgroup within Indo-European. So Armenian, Phrygian, Albanian, Thracian, etc. I would think that Armenian, Greek, and Indo-European go together as a dialectal unit. But of course, Albanian, with its limited system of comparanda still, but it is very close to Greek and Phrygian, and then it's worth of studying this way. But of course, we should. So I saw some research in taking together Armenian and Albanian, which do not consider the linguistic methodology because they take common words, which are in fact both borrowings from Turkish, for example, and from the other side we have really words which are cognate. So a totally different world. So in this lexical share, from one side we have really Indo-European legacy, so that our Armenian and Albanian are bound with the same Indo-European root. So they continue the same Indo-European root independently. But on the other hand, we have just very recent similarities as a common borrowing from Turkish or from other source, etc. So we have to really distinguish between these totally different layers.
Yeah. Thank you, Hrach. Although most of us are not linguists, but we did get an idea about the details and how interesting research is. If you can stop sharing so we can.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Thank you. I do have a general question. Any of you, three of you can respond. The younger generation increasingly depends on digital communication, which may lead to a decline in their interest or ability to learn and use their heritage language. In the context of Armenian, what strategies do you recommend encouraging younger people to actively engage with and preserve their linguistic heritage? Who would?
Well, there's a basic type of answer to that kind of question or response to it, which comes from Joshua Fishman's thinking and also Pierre Bourdieu's thinking, that languages and varieties of language have social economic capital or social capital, and which I think is on the right track. And the way to increase the chances of kids wanting to use a language involve attaching social capital or value to that language. I'll give you an example of a parallel from my son, who's 12. When I was growing up, my parents forced me to take cello lessons and piano lessons and listen to classical music. And that gave those excellent genres and instruments negative social value. Things you're forced to do by your family typically are not things you as a kid are going to value. So I made an effort not to impose classical music or piano lessons or anything like that on my son. But it turns out that the games he plays on Roblox and the things he watches on YouTube, which are, what all kids these days are up to, they actually use classical music in the background all the time. I think one reason for that is it's not licensed typically. So there's a lot of free music you can put in the background of your games and videos that will not lead to them getting taken down by YouTube. Whereas if you use a modern pop act, the record company will force you to take it down. As a result, in his first 12 years, he's been exposed to a lot of classical music, and it has a lot of social capital for him because it shows up in contexts that he values highly, like video games and YouTube videos. So my quick reaction to the question, which is a very important one, obviously, is if we can think about ways, if we value the Armenian language and its survival, which I think we all do, if we can think of ways to increase its social capital. And Hrach and Gayane and Hasmig, I think you guys will all be much more plugged in to possibilities for how that could be made to happen in an Armenian social context. So I'd be interested to hear what you think.
So in other words, create the opportunity for it to be naturally, they need to be naturally exposed to it so that the idea is not imposed on them to give that negative reaction to it, is what I'm understanding.
In contexts in which they value it.
Yes. Thank you. I have another question also. How can we ensure a thoughtful balance between the growing reliance on AI-driven language generation and the preservation of traditional methods for language development? Or should we have a happy medium or a balance? What do you think? Any one of you would like to?
I want to briefly answer to that question. I think that if before there was a diversity of different accents, dialects, formal, non-formal ways, jargons, and everything, and the institutions were fighting for standardization and keeping these literary forms as the priority. I believe that now the people must be encouraged to speak all the diverse possible forms of language on condition that the speech is experienced. Because I see that, for example, it has become very normal among the young generation to say, and not only the young generation, but also the social media communities to write and to say, «Ես ուզում եմ կիսվել իմ ոգսերով կամ ուրախությունս, կիսվել իմ ուրախությամբ». And when I was arguing with my younger colleagues and students that this is not Armenian, it's a type of grammatical borrowing from our Russian construction, делиться впечатлениями, делиться радостью, they said, no, this is normal Armenian, everyone says it. So the norm sometimes is coming very gradually and silently, and the norm of the language is changing. This is how the languages are disappearing and dying. It's becoming normal to use the wrong ways and to use the different constructions that come, and the AI language will come to replace the natural language. So in order to avert this, I think that the dialects, the fairy tales, the folk tales, the language, the songs which preserve these different dialects must be activated in their different ways, just to keep that specific Armenian spirit, which the people recognize even when they speak a different language, like we recognize the accent, the Armenian accent. So there is an Armenian way of pronouncing words and structuring sentences. This must be encouraged. This is my belief, because I feel that language is not something to be standardized and kept classically clean. In that case, we shall not simply use it. We have to use it as it is, and as it is, as much it is close to our soul, spirit, and essence. Thank you.
Thank you, Gayane. That was interesting. One last question, if any one of you may respond. The major languages in the digital world today are, for example, English, Mandarin, and Spanish. Does this dominance represent a risk to the survival of smaller languages, such as Armenian and other languages? What do you think?
The more the diversity, the better.
Hrach, anything?
It's nothing to add here, but if you allow, I would like to make a comment about the calcs. So it's there is a huge discrepancy how to interpret and how the speakers interpret and understand the calcs, and there are a lot of arguments about it. And whenever some pattern coincides with the Russian, then even the very intellectual people come aggressively saying that stop using this. So Andreve Galis, for example. So they say this is from a calc from Russian, Dozh idiot. So this is not a logical way. This is not Armenian, etc. But in fact, this is totally wrong, of course, because it is attested even in 5th century classical Armenian. So we should strongly distinguish between between common patterns and direct calcs, and so we see that they coincide very frequently, and so our and on the other side, when we have a calc from a new language, from English or Russian, so whenever we don't have anything before that, because this issue came as a totally new thing, then we see that very quickly this calc is becoming an active and living part. And also it doesn't give any impression of being foreign. So in such cases, I'm not against the calcs if they function in this efficient way. So there's
Yeah,
many
that's the
prints, many
attitude
streams
of
about that.
English. Yeah, that's the attitude of English. If the word appeared in English, the phrase, and it's borrowed, calqued from different languages, it is considered to be English, especially in this digital media and everything. I even came across that phrase, rain is coming, in English. Rain is coming.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's fine.
thank you for this. I know it's still the beginning of these. We haven't, studies or panels about the AI and the digital age. I'm sure linguists and many others will have the chance to study and explore this further. So as we wrap up this panel, it's clear that technology and AI bring both exciting possibilities and some new hurdles for our languages, and especially for Armenian, as we saw along the way. Thank you all, for the rest of the participants, for your attentions, for joining this. And
There's a question on the chat, I think.
shall we allow that? Okay, let's. I don't see it.
Yeah, I could not concentrate on it, but I was trying to read and understand. Vartan Gaprilyan's question.
Vartan, let's see. Okay, I'm Vartan Gaprilyan, founder of Mayasin, a new social media with the Armenian version currently serving as our pilot. Mayasin already includes a real-time translation system within its messaging feature. We are now exploring how to expand this capability further, not only by translating from one commonly used spoken language into another, but also by transforming informal everyday language into a more formal literacy version of the same language. What possible solutions or technical approaches could support this?
We are all linguists here, and I don't think that we can propose any technical solutions, but I would just ask another question. Why do you want to transform informal phrases into a literary version? Maybe those informal this informal language contains kind of stylistic shades or even things of forensic significance that they should stay as they are. Why do you want them to be formal and literary and standardized, like flattened? What's the purpose? Vartan, are you here?
I see Vartan, yeah. Yeah, Vartan,
Yes,
Vartan, please, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The objective of this question is to see the different possibilities that we may have and that we may need. It's, for example, somebody speaking in Chinese, writing in Chinese or in Russian, let's say, with a jargon way of speaking. And I'm a French guy and waiting for the translation based on my understanding. But the Russian jargon and the French jargon may not correspond. So to make it easy for this side of people to understand what the other side is saying, the logical way, maybe it's wrong from my side to think it this way, because Professor Gayane is putting under doubt the way I'm thinking about this, and I understand why she doubts it. And the question is to see how easy it should be for me to understand exactly and accurately the meaning of the words pronounced in a jargon way, because the translation of jargons could be different. A translation of literary spoken languages, it's very easy to translate. This is the subtlety that I was looking for.
If I may ask, just to check if I understood you precisely, you want the style of a jargon to be translated into the literary language, yes?
If I was assured that the jargon could be translated to an excellent jargon in French, I would say there is no need to translate it in a literary language. But since I have made some experiences and I saw that the meaning, we are losing the right subtlety, the nuance of the meaning of the jargon, because the jargon can have several interpretations contrary to the literary language, which is very strict and comprehensive. The jargon is very unique and local, and it's related to a mindset and not to a language. It's related to traditions. It's related to humor, etc. So it's very difficult to have the exact meaning. But when we translate jargon in Russian, let's say, that we may understand into literary Armenian or French or English, then the margin of error could be
Yes,
very
lower.
little.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that Google Translate is doing this kind of translation. And for example, with my translator students, we're working on, parallel aligned translation. When we're taking the original, then we're taking the Google Translate, and then comparing the translation with the original, we're trying to post edit. This is done not, well, humans are post-editing usually. So far, I don't know if there's a technical, like digital way of doing this kind of translation, but Google usually is doing precise linguistic translation.
Since it was talking about Yeznik Kokhbatsi earlier, and what Professor Hrach has demonstrated in his, I think that my request is much easier than showing Kokhbatsi and other complicated issues.
Okay.
Thank you, Baran.
Thank you.
Hagop, do you have anything to add or conclude?
Thank you very much, Hasmig, and thank you, Hrach and Gayane and Bert. This was a very interesting discussion. I'm sorry about what happened in the early part of this event, and it's out of our control. As Dr. Dergirian suggested, maybe somebody was admitted who shouldn't have been. I don't know what happened, but we will try to find out what is the reason. ARPA Institute works always with donations. So if you like what we're doing, please donate as much as you can. You can go to our website, arpainstitute.org, and there is a button there you can use to donate. Thank you very much, and hopefully we'll see you next time, and we will send out new invitations.
Thank you.
All right.
Have a
Goodbye.
good weekend,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.